Hi, Emil. It's Emil Guillermo. Emil, Amok to you. Yeah, that guy. That guy. Yeah. Welcome if you're watching on YouTube at Emil Guillermo, the YouTube channel, or if you're watching, you could be watching on Twitter at Emil Amok using that funky graphic user interface, the old Periscope interface, I think. I mean, you got to use your finger. You got to use your finger to. It's live, and you see, I just discovered this sort of like. Did you ever have one of those curtains? You know, from the. They were just like strings of beads hanging from the door, and you went through them and kind of made a splash with every entrance. I found that I had one of these things in this software package, and I thought, well, I could just use a black border, but why not use this? And it goes so well with my gong, my garlanded gong. Anyway, welcome to the program, Emil Amok's Takeout, my takes on all things considerable. This is the micro talk show. I call it a micro talk show because it's small. It's intended to be small, not like a big talk show. A micro talk show of the AAPI and the AAX's AAPI, Asian American Pacific Islander. We shall not forget the Native Hawaiians. The White House certainly is not. They're calling it the White House Asian American Pacific Islander Native Hawaiian whatever. They got it going. I checked my ALDEF blog column back last Asian American Pacific Islander Native Hawaiian Heritage Month, and I said, let's include those Native Hawaiians. They've been screwed long enough. Anyway, if you're part of that group, the AAPINHs, or if you're just an AAX, if you like that naming convention, I prefer the AAX, Asian American, and then the X, fill in your ethnicity. Hmong, AAH, your Oz. Asian American Cambodian, AAC, not to be confused with the Asian American Chinese. AACHs, the Ach, which I know the Achs in Brooklyn feel like they just love it there. They're kind of cross-cultural there. Or you're an AAJ, Asian American Japanese. Anyway, look, it's a naming convention that I think puts Asian first, right? And then stresses the American. Our Asianness comes out. We don't need a hyphen, but then we get the ethnicity in there. Because here's the thing about being an Asian American. There are so many of us, which is a good thing. That's diversity. That gives us 24 million, right? And then there's look, I was here. My father came to America when there was like 0 Asian Americans. There are a handful, right? And then as I was growing up, there may have been, 4 or 5 million at best? 5 million? When Vincent Chin was killed in 82, there was maybe 5 million Asian Americans. I know some of you are saying, I'm going to check that number, Emil. We're going to find out how you're shortchanging the Asian Americans. No, but right now we've got 24 million. I mean, that's amazing. Anyway, it's a talk show for us because talk shows do not ever include us. And that's the whole point. That's the whole point of what I do. That's the whole point of my column on the ALDEF blog, the Asian American Legal Defense and Education Fund. It's there. It moved over there about 12 years ago from the pages of Asian Week. I know some of you are so young, you don't remember Asian Week. It was an Asian American news weekly, the largest Asian American news weekly, the largest publication of its kind in English. That's what made it so special. Asian Week. And now there's a movement. There's a movement to bring some of it back, the archives, to see just how a lot of the things that we're going through today recycle. I mean, that's the kind of interesting thing. It just recycles. And if you're interested, and if you're on Facebook, that's where you can chat to me. You can chat on Facebook at emilguillermo.media. There's a little Facebook drop, and then you can say, well, Emil, what are you talking about? I mean, to call this a talk show, I know. I'm calling it a talk show, and you cannot talk. I'm making it easy on you. You can just say, well, Emil, except for that thing in the background here that makes it look like a disco ball and you're playing that music, it reminds me of that, like, and I have disco phobia, Emil. I got to listen. I can't watch you. Look, if you go to Facebook at emilguillermo.media, you can like put on the chat and say things like, Emil, you can respond. But otherwise, you can just sort of listen and then, do the slow burn and say, I don't know if I agree with him. I don't know if I agree with that Emil Amok, who's gone amok. On today's show, of course, we're going to talk about the slap, which wasn't a punch, which is more like a strike, but I like to call a blow because it was kind of a blow, and it was heard around the world, and it was on the Oscars. Around the world, it turns out, is just like 15, 16 million people on TV. The Oscars aren't what they used to be. It used to be a global bacchanal on video. And now, for some reason, the ratings are down. This is the second lowest Oscars. 15 million only. And it used to be like global. Everyone used to watch. And I guess with the foreign films, especially, you had global audiences. Remember that scene? I think in, that scene in one of the Indian movies of the last 10, 15 years, I can't remember right now. But yeah, everyone used to watch, and now they don't. But social media had like 22 million engagements. And I was talking to a person in London on the day of the Oscars, and I asked her, are you going to watch the Oscars? And he says, nah, I got homework. I'm doing. Okay, all right. Anyway, we're going to talk about Chris Rock because today is his day. Chris Rock is going to do some concerts today, and he's talking how he's feeling. Let's not forget his feelings. We'll talk more about my column. We'll talk about Ketanji news. There's lots of Ketanji news. Ketanji Brown Jackson. There's a poll out calling her essentially maybe the most popular Supreme Court justice nominee ever. I called her the people's nominee. I think after the hearings of last week, hard to believe it was just last week. Seems so long ago, right? But that was a mugging. You'll recall Clarence Thomas called what happened to him way in the 80s. 90s, actually. They called what happened to him, early 90s. He called it a high-tech lynching. Actually, it was a suitable grilling if you were, not a Clarence Thomas rooter, but you were an Anita Hill rooter. I happen to be partial to Anita Hill, but I didn't see the Jackson hearings as being a high-tech lynching. I saw it just as a mugging. She was mugged by Cruz and Hawley and all those folks. See it on my AltF blog, my column there. And I think she was tremendous in how she stood up to the onslaught. I mean, it wasn't a matter of they were attacks. I mean, they weren't jokes. It was serious. And thank goodness she had that. There's that judicial temperament on display. She also had her methodology. I just think she's going to be great. Anyway, talk more about Ketanji news. There's stuff happening today. Ukraine, I'll just mention it now. Yesterday we talked about, oh, well, Russia's going to withdraw. Right. They're going to sort of like reconfigure their forces. Yeah. And also never let up. So the lesson for people who were willing to trust and not verify, well, you see how Russia lies. You see how Russia is not a credible player. And then here's the news on the New York Times website. Tension between Russian leader and defense ministry appears to be growing. Putin has been misinformed about his military struggles from AIDS, fearful about his reaction, according to U.S. intelligence. What that says is, when you have an autocratic world, the autocrat just says, you do what I say. And if you don't do what he says, you lie. Back to the autocrat. He doesn't know. He doesn't know what's really going on. You know, you think the Russian people don't know what's going on in Ukraine. From this U.S. intelligence report, reported in the New York Times, it sounds like Putin doesn't know because his fearful commanders out in the field are too scared to tell Putin the truth. That is one wacky world that we are a part of because they are affecting our world. And that's what's going on. That's how the Russian military is dealing with how they're losing. We better not tell Vladimir because we're going to get our butts kicked. Okay, just tell them things are going well. And then they're not. And that's why perhaps they continue to attack today, even though they said they might withdraw or would withdraw. Everyone older who's been around the block said, you can't trust Russia. You can't trust Putin. And now we have even more reason not to trust anything that's going on there from the Russians. Of course, I'm reading this from the New York Times, citing intelligence reports. Do you trust the New York Times? Well, more than I do Russia. Although, look, historically, Asian Americans have had reasons not to trust the New York Times. Anyway, so that's what's happening in Ukraine. We have a situation where it looks like Ukraine, or the Russians rather, want this North and South Korea type situation set up. The Ukrainians just say to the Americans and to the West, we need more artillery, we need more guns, we need more planes, we need more help. They're doing a heck of a job, but NATO seems to be unwilling to go forward. So we're just going to see more of this until someone realizes that the only way we're going to stop this, because it looks like we're a long way off from economic sanctions alone convincing Putin. We just got to arm the Ukrainians till they've warded off. I don't know. And every day it's just a sad story what's going on in Ukraine in terms of the refugee situation. We're now to 4 million, and I don't know. You know, I also do the PETA podcast, and I understand that the effort to save animals that have been abandoned and left behind, that was going well, but now things are crumbling. The infrastructure is crumbling within Ukraine, and it's very difficult to keep the kind of setup that they had. So it's just the whole thing. When you're under the cloud of war, it's just sad. And of course, all of this is avoidable. I mean, the aggressive actions of Russia causing this pain, the West willing to step it up, but just to the point. And I just don't know how Ukraine can keep it up unless they get the kind of reinforcements they want. So we'll see how much longer this goes. I just hope that at some point someone has to say ceasefire while talks begin, or talks try to get some kind of momentum, because it just seems counterproductive to have talks off and on and shelling and military aggression incessant all the while. It just does not compute. So that's what's going on in Russia, or Ukraine. We always have to talk about it because we can't let it happen so that we forget about it. Because if we don't talk about it, we'll forget about it. And we can't forget about it. We can't forget about Russia invading a sovereign nation, taking away freedom, destroying democracy or threatening democracy. We have joined the NATO nations to stand up for democracy. We'll see how long we can just keep standing before we start acting. But this is on us. We're global citizens, right? Can't just forget about it. So that's Ukraine. Always going to mention that. The other bits in the news, I talked about the fourth booster, or the second booster, the fourth shot, however you want to call it. Some people haven't had the first three yet. I am eligible for the fourth shot. I'm going to wait for the science. The thing that I heard today from Besser, the former doc who he was the interim director of the CDC. He said the boosters give you a period of relief, say 6 months or so. And if you get it now and you live in an area where it's not as serious, the virus, you kind of use up the strength of your booster when there's no threat. And the real threat comes maybe when the BA2 variant starts going crazy. It's more transmissible. And if we see a spike, not now in March, April, but in May, June, maybe that's when you get the booster. I don't know. It's almost now. We now look at charts to see, well, where are the deaths, or where are the hospitalizations, or how many people are vaccinated, how many people are not. We almost look at these charts like they were stock charts, and they're moving averages. And I know we all want to just set it and forget it, right? Put it in an index fund, Emil. But I just think it's kind of you got to look at your local situation, because it's going to be different everywhere. You're going to look at the map, and the map's going to show orange to, dark orange in spots. But for the most part, the country looks fairly light virus-wise for now. Snapshot in time. So beware. But at least that booster is available. So I might as well play my swish. Every talk show should have a swish sound. Yeah, the transition swish, of course. Okay, I talked about Chris Rock. To go back to the slap, which isn't a punch, which is more like a strike, which is kind of like what I call a blow. It was a blow. Blow is more generic. A slap, as I mentioned yesterday, a slap is still a strike and still can hurt. Not just, superficially to the skin, but if you catch someone in the right way, it's more than a sting. If you happen to snap a guy's neck, catch him on the chin, that's a knockout punch, right? If it's hard enough and everything's got to be lined up right. It's like, the planetary aspect of it all has to be just right for the eclipse to be seen. Okay. This is from page 6. You know that Chris Rock has got this big sold out concert series tonight in Boston. So this couldn't have happened at a better time for him. We just haven't heard from Chris Rock, but we're hearing some reports about conversations that he had a couple months ago on a podcast by Dana Carvey and David Spade called Fly on the Wall, where Rock said he used to be bullied ridiculously. He said half of the bullying was because I was just a little guy. Then I got bused to school, and the bullying was because I was a little guy and I was black. I was getting double bullied, the guy said on the podcast, Fly on the Wall, Dana Carvey and David Spade. So he hung out with his old buddies. He said at one point he finally decided to fight back against a bully. I went home. I put a brick in a book bag. This is like a legendary story in my neighborhood. I swung that expletive and smacked the guy in the face with this brick and stomped on him, Joe Pesci style, to the point that we thought he might die, Rock recounted. He noted that the violent incident prompted him to seek therapy. Probably not then when he did it, but probably decades later upon recollection. He says, long story short, from that day on, as my shrink puts it to me, you have been scared to be angry ever since. The guy you saw was bending over backwards to be nice because I was so scared of my anger. Rock said his therapist told him he had to move past the incident because this guy brought something out in you and you're so scared of that thing coming out of you again that you let the whole world walk all over you. He added, your friends walk over you, your friends walk over you, your female relationships, everyone just F's you over. Rock said he can now better handle his emotions. I'm not scared of letting people know how I feel about certain things. Now I can say, hey, I don't like what you said to me without losing my head, without hitting someone on the head with a freaking brick. You know, this is the thing. He handled it coolly. You got to say that of all the actors in this, Rock, Will Smith, Jada Pinkett Smith, Chris Rock was cool. And he got off the best line. This has to be the greatest night in television. So I don't know what Chris Rock's going to do. If you go to my column on the ALDEF blog, aaldef.org/blog, I talk about how, he could end up owning half of Will Smith's production company if he wanted to. Chris Rock is friends with Wanda Sykes, and she was out there. She's been out in the media. She was at the same party as Chris Rock the night of the Oscars, and Chris Rock, she said, apologized to her about a night that should have been Wanda Sykes, the three hostesses, and the films, but that whole incident sort of took over. So Chris Rock apologized to Wanda Sykes, but then Wanda Sykes today is out there criticizing Will Smith. She says she feels so awful for her friend Chris. It was sickening. It was absolutely sickening. I felt ill, physically ill. I'm still a little traumatized by it. Traumatized. I mean, that's how a lot of people saw this, which is why this is important. This is more important. This is not just something you sort of let go and say, Hollywood, celebrities acting like celebrities. I mean, on some level, yes. But look at how many times people use the term trauma to describe what went on Sunday night. And this is what Sykes said. For them to let him, Will Smith, stay in that room and enjoy the rest of the show and accept his award, I was like, how gross is this? This is what Wanda Sykes, the host, said. It was just the wrong message. You assault somebody, you get escorted out the building. That's it. For them to let him continue, I thought it was gross. This is Wanda Sykes telling Ellen DeGeneres, and it's reported in the Daily Beast, the conversation. So Wanda said, I know Will Smith, apologized to Chris, but we were the host. This is our house. We're inviting you in. We're hosts. We're going to take care of you all night. Make sure you have a good time. No one has apologized to us, and we worked hard to put the show together. Actually, as she acknowledged, Chris Rock did apologize to Wanda Sykes. But this shows you just how everyone, from their perspective, has a take. Even, of course, Asian Americans, like myself. I wrote this column on Monday, and it went on yesterday. And you may or may not agree with it, but I wrote it from an Asian American perspective, from an Asian American point of view. And I didn't look at it really as a race thing, although race certainly plays a part in this. As if you take 10 people looking at a situation, it's like Rashomon, right? 10 people looking at it, 10 different points of views. I think Rashomon was 7 in the actual movie. But really, I saw this as just the relevant thing was the violence. The relevant thing was the casual violence that we see in front of our eyes. And then when we don't see it corrected right away or in an appropriate way, it makes it look like it's okay. And my point in my column is it's not okay. And I'm talking about violence begetting more violence. And the reason why this is important. Now, you say, Emil, Asian Americans, we don't really belong in this conversation. Well, I don't know. We watched it. Will Smith in his apology apologized on Instagram yesterday to everyone who was watching, including me, the worldwide audience. So how does this pertain to us? Well, it's because you get into disagreements with someone. Say you're Will Smith and there's a Chris Rock in your life. Do you go and punch him? No, you don't. You maintain control and you don't strike. You maintain control. Maybe you talk, you find time to talk later, but violence isn't the answer. Now, I talked about how if you have a perspective, white male, white female, black female, Asian female, Hispanic male, Hispanic. I mean, we all look at it and we might have different perspectives, different opinions. I saw a black male rider say, from Philadelphia, say, this is just bad because there are people being killed on the streets because they can't handle disagreements. They can't get past the let's talk about it. They go straight for a gun or for the exit, the bullet, the weapon that helps the person that you disagree with just exit. And we don't have to get to that point. There's all sorts of things we could do before we get to that point. It's called talking to one another. I mean, that's the thing that gets me about this whole situation. And that's why when I saw Chris Rock and Will Smith, I heard the joke. I saw Jada Pinkett Smith's reaction, her eye roll, Will Smith's laugh at first, and then him striding, and then him swinging, and then him going back. It almost looked like he had a little smile on his face as he went back to his seat. And then Will Smith yelling, "Take my wife's name out your effing," right? So you look at this and you say, what does this have to do with Asian Americans, Emil? Well, come on. Look at what we've lived with for the last 2 years. Violence is violence. There's violence toward Asians. And it's because of the twice impeached former president who scapegoated us. And so my column begins with just saying how there are a lot of these people who were victimized by that signal that came from the White House that said, go get the Asians. And they did. And I just think that, well, it was just an honest opinion on my part. When I saw that happen, I saw it for what it was, a violent act. And then I pondered all the violent acts I've had to ponder and think about as I've written about these instances, these random hate incidents against Asian Americans throughout the country, many of them in New York. And I listed them out, and I just couldn't believe the names after name after name after name. If only we could somehow control this anger or control this whatever is putting out this violent rage. It was honest, it was authentic. It's about violence. That's what the Chris Rock, Will Smith incident is about, and controlling that violence. And what is a suitable response? I wrote this column. A person I know, a law school dean, sent me a note. He said, I think you express in your column the values that carry over to the way people feel about seeing their elders, sisters, spouses, and daughters attacked on streets and in stores. He says, as your column states, in the Oscar situation, casualized violent crime. That's what we're fighting against. And that's what makes everyone casualties. There's a kind of casual nature to this, especially if we want to say, oh, it was no big deal. Tell the person who says it's no big deal that, yeah, it really is a big deal. Not that we want to explode this out of proportion, but violence is violence. It is never right. And thank goodness the Academy came out in a more full-throated manner on Tuesday to say, or actually late Monday. It was later on Monday in the papers most of Tuesday. They just said, we condemn this. And now they're looking into maybe taking away Will Smith's Oscar, which is, I think it would be, if they took away his Oscar, he'd survive. I think I saw some reports that said that even Harvey Weinstein and Roman Polanski, who were later involved in things, were able to keep their Oscars. So these are all parts of debate. But this is sort of I hasten to call it wonderful, because it's not wonderful that this thing happened. But it makes you realize and understand the virtue of speech in our country, the virtue of having voices from all perspectives look at this and then weigh in and respect one another and not take the Will Smith route in terms of responding. And by Will Smith route, I mean not just the physical act of, putting one down, striking at each other. I just mean the figurative way of maybe attacking one ad hominem. I mean, there's no place for that, right? I saw someone on Twitter put down that, does this mean we can't say yo mama jokes? And I said, well, yo mama joke. I mean, I grew up in a school in San Francisco where yo mama jokes was like, oh man, I don't want to play yo mama. I felt bad. But that was the form of expression. It was almost like that was their rap, right? I mean, people know what that is. From the very basic, your mama wears combat boots, to your mama, it's what would be the Asian version. Your mama smells like dried fish. That would be a bad yo mama Filipino style. But, in company where it's accepted as part of the culture, you say, yeah, we do it. But see, this is part of the thing about who has the right to say what. And you know what? If we don't agree with you, we'll cancel you. That's the real problem that comes out of this. And I hope that doesn't happen, where people get so heated that there's one side that, I don't know what one side says, but there's some sides that some people are going to disagree. They're going to say, oh, Chris Rock was right. Oh, Jada was right. Oh, Will Smith was right. Oh, the Academy was right. And then on the basis of that calculus, someone will say, well, we definitely have to cancel this person, and that we got to cancel this person. We can't cancel anybody. This is America. We don't cancel. We listen. We choose to accept the debate, or we allow the speech to flow and we move on. So, but I kept thinking about the song We Don't Talk About Bruno, right? Because Bruno is the perfect song for a situation where you believe in free speech, except when we disagree with you. I'm sorry, Emil. Free speech is all right, and you're free to say what you will. But, we disagree with you. We're going to cancel you. You see, it's America. You can say what you will, but you shouldn't cancel. You can debate, right? When you disagree, it just means more speech, not less. It means when you say something disagreeable, it just means, okay, we just had more speech. More speech is good. So here's Raisa says Will Smith should be banned from Oscars and Chris Rock should sue him. Well, I don't know. That's up to Chris Rock, right? That's his take. Right now, he's not filing charges. He's not filing charges because I think he's trying to be cool about it. And I think if he does anything, it's not going to be personal. It's not going to be, I'm doing this as Chris Rock. It's because he'll have a lawyer doing it. Just like we have agents doing things for us. So the agents talk to the person who will hire, and they can argue, and they don't have to impact you personally, the client. But this is not over. I mean, if you're a lawyer, you get, someone just doesn't issue an apology and it all goes away. There will likely be some kind of protracted thing. And in the public, well, even if it doesn't go to the courts, because some public or some district attorneys say, oh, what a waste of time to bring this to the court, especially if Chris Rock does not, if he's an uncooperative defendant. But what Chris Rock could be, I mean, it doesn't have to be a criminal matter. It could be, as the viewer suggested, if Chris Rock sues, a civil matter. Could be a civil case, right? I think. Always looking to the courts. We're so litigious. No, I'm just saying, I think court of public opinion is just fine. We should have the court of a public opinion where we can exchange views, exchange ideas. But we shouldn't have this canceling thing going on where I cancel you and you cancel me. No, everyone in a First Amendment democracy is allowed their free speech. But remember, free speech is a matter of like governmental entities, like Congress, right? The law is Congress shall not Emil shall not, the First Amendment applies in, say, workplace situations if you work for the government, or if you are, somehow told or restricted by a governmental entity or a governmental rule. But free speech, in general, the First Amendment does not apply there necessarily. In general, we adopt the idea of everyone has a right to free speech and we allow it to happen. But believe me, if you said something at work and you called out your boss, and your boss said, why are you telling me a yo mama joke, Emil? And if you said, well, I got free speech rights. Well, he said, you don't have free speech rights here at work. You're fired. Caution. Know when the First Amendment applies. So, anyway, I kept thinking about the song We Don't Talk About Bruno. We don't talk about Bruno. We talk about everything. But when he comes to the guy who can see the future and can say when it rains, oh, we don't want to talk about Bruno. So a mixture of the First Amendment and I know Filipinos believe in superstition. But somehow this could be like a Bruno moment, right? We don't talk about Bruno. That's why it's better to talk about all this stuff. And I think that's a good thing. I think that's a good thing. We're talking about this. Play that swish, Emil. I want to transition to this. Roxanne Gay writes for the New York Times. She wrote an interesting opinion piece. Jada Pinkett Smith shouldn't have to take a joke, and neither should you, is what Roxanne Gay writes. First, let me tell you my opinion about Jada Pinkett Smith. She's a strong woman. She's strong. And I think maybe this is one of the reasons that Will Smith has an issue, because he's confused. He doesn't know How am I supposed to act? I'm going to defend my... No, Jada Pinkett Smith doesn't need your defense. Will Smith, she could do it on her own. And she was smart enough and she was cool enough. And she reigned, right? She was the queen. She was royal there, just sitting back watching this happen. And meanwhile, Will Smith just loses cool and goes out and strikes Chris Rock. Now, I think Jada Pinkett Smith was... Excuse me. I think she was strong. She was regal. She put out something on Instagram about, time to heal. I'm here for it. Something like that. Which is good, but she knows that it's better not to talk. It's better not to talk. But I turned to Roxane Gay because people look on her as a kind of, modern day opinion writer on this. And so this was her take. She says, this is not a defense of Will Smith, who does not need me to defend him, which is true. Just like I said, Jada Smith doesn't need me to defend her. She says, instead, this is a defense of thin skin. It is a defense of boundaries and being human and enforcing one's limits. It's a repudiation of the incessant valorizing of taking a joke, having a sense of humor. It is a rejection of the expectation that we laugh off everything people want to say and do to us. I think a lot about how we are constantly asked to make our skin even thicker. Toughen yourself, we're told, whoever we are, whatever we've been through or going through. Stop being so brittle and sensitive. Oh, brittle, that's a word of Dave Chappelle. Lighten up. I'm not talking about constructive criticism or accountability, but rather the intense scrutiny and unnecessary commentary people have to deal with when they challenge others' expectations one way or the other. All right, look, I agree with Roxane Gay. I don't think we are humorless when we respond to a guy who says a ching chong joke and expects us as Asian Americans to get it. I don't think we need to get thick skin and just deal with it. But I have to say that I'm of the generation that has had to live most of my life dealing with it. So, I actually agree with Roxane Gay. I'm not surprised by that. I agree. Thick skin yourself. I'm celebrating thin skin. Thin skinness. My thin skin. Emil Guillermo's thin skin. Emil Amok's thin skin. I've been thick skinning it all my life. Thank you, Roxane Gay, for giving me the New York Times guest opinion approval to be thin skinned. Because, yeah. I mean, it's okay, because here's the thing. Your thick skin, my thin skin, where does it lead? If we just acknowledge that you don't need thick skin, my thin skin's cool, where does it lead? It leads to discussion. It leads to talking. That's the only way that we get out of whatever morass we find ourselves in. Got to communicate. Got to talk to one another. Oh, I'm going to have thick skin. I'm not going to talk. Oh, but I have thin skin. I'm ready to talk. So that guy, the thin skinner, goes out there and he's, oh, wow, he's a muck. And the thick skinned person says, well, he was going to do that. That's on me. I'm thick skinned. Well, we need both of you. We need the thick and the thin skin out there together, talking it out. Back to Roxane Gay. She says, who is served by all this thick skin? Those who want to behave with impunity. If the targets of derision only had thicker skin, their aggressors could say or do as they please. If we all had the thickest skin, no one would have to take responsibility for cruelties, big or small. It's an alluring idea to some, I suppose. Yeah, I mean, if we're all thick skinned, we just let it fly. No one talks. He says, who's served by the thick skin? Those who want to behave with impunity. I'm not saying the thin skinners like me behave with impunity. It just, the thin skinners like me speak out. Not necessarily be provoking or to be provocative, but if it makes you think about something in a different way, that's of value, I think. Maybe it's another perspective. So here's where Gay gets into it with the comedians, and this is where thick skin, because he usually comes up with I've people have said to me when I'm thin skinned about people talking about ching chong talk and jokes, especially bad with white comedians. Not so bad if you're talking about your mother, your father, if you're Asian, but if you're not, you're white, you're talking about the guy who served you Chinese food. Not so good. So Roxane Gay says, thick skin comes up often in the context of comedy. Done well, comedy can offer witty, biting observations about human frailties. It can force us to look in the mirror and get honest with ourselves, to laugh and move forward. Yeah. Done less well, it leaves its targets feeling raw, exposed, wounded. And not mortally, but wounded. Well, laughter at my expense, I guess, right? Roxane Gay goes on. It should go without saying that comedians are free to say what they please. Of course, she has to say that. And she's wrong to say it goes without saying. You got to say it because people aren't going to really understand. Long live creative license and free speech. Yes, free speech, more of it. But it should be obvious that the targets of jokes and insults have every right to react and respond. Yes, they do. There is a strange idea that there is nobility in tolerating, and better yet, enjoying humor that attacks who you are, what you do, or how you look. That with free speech comes the obligation to turn the other cheek, to rise above, to laugh it all off. We often see this when comedians want to joke about race, sexual assault, gender violence, or other issues that people experiencing them don't find terribly funny. If you can't laugh along, you are humorless, you're thin-skinned, you're a problem. Well, thank goodness. I mean, I think Roxane Gay's right. I can tell you how many times people have told me. I mean, they told me to have a thicker skin. I've said, no, my skin is brown. And that's thick enough. And if it's thin enough to speak out, I'm going to speak out. So this is the last graph of Roxane Gay's piece. She says, yeah, they're all public figures because, public figures, they sort of are considered fair game. An imperviousness to criticism and ridicule is a necessity for celebrities or anyone in the public eye. But no matter how thick your skin is, or with how much wealth, fame, and power you are cosseting, being the butt of a joke isn't fun. Just being a butt isn't fun. That's my ad. Sometimes it is intolerable when you are constantly a target of jokes, insults, incivility, and worse, as most black women are, and as I'd like to say, as most Asian Americans can be, as most Asian American women and men can be. Back to Roxane Gay. The skin we've spent a lifetime thickening can come apart. We're only human, and so too are the people who love us. So, look, as I said, I don't disagree with Roxane Gay. In fact, I agree with her. I've been thin-skinned for a long time and told to thicken up. I need to thicken up. That's why I have a good vocabulary. That's so anyway, Roxane Gay, guest opinion, New York Times. And it says that, look, the idea is the thick skinners, they just need to own up to what they're feeling. I think they have to develop a sense of thin skin so they speak out. Because at some point you have to speak out. But it doesn't mean you have to attack. It doesn't mean you have to go after people with, in that ad hominem way. What it does mean is it brings us together in discussion. And that kind of discussion is always, always, always worthwhile. Always worthwhile. Now we go to the chat. Let's see. Here's Ray says, speaking out is fine. Destroying people's lives, getting them fired because your little feelings were hurt, that's how society has been destroyed. Well, as I said, it shouldn't be ad hominem. We should be respectful. It's part of the grand debate, right? And debate is what makes the free speech, First Amendment nation we live in what it is. But I just think that sometimes, here's Juanita. Juanita says, Juanita Salai Wilson, who I said happy birthday to the other day. Thank you. Thin skin is in. Well, responsible thin skin. You want to be responsible with your thin skinness. But I think thin skin is not a bad thing. Because at some point, just like Chris Rock said in that podcast where he talks about being bullied, at some point he stood up. At some point he stood up for himself. Stop the bullying. But it created these issues, these psychological issues. But interesting how I think people, when they talk about this incident, they will talk about trauma. They will talk about being traumatized. They will talk about something they will never forget. In 5 to 10 years, I assure you, you will forget all the films that were nominated for Best Picture. You will forget all the nominees for Best Actor, You'll forget everyone who won, maybe. You might forget that my choice for Best Picture was Drive My Car, which I considered a work of art. Quiet, thin-skinned movie. But you will not forget this whole discussion that came out of the slap, strike, blow, punch, whatever one. It wasn't a punch. But you will never forget Smith Rock 2022. I think that's clear. We are never going to forget Smith Rock 2022. I think that there are moments at the Oscars that we never forget. I was talking the other day about Sasheen Littlefeather, right? How many people, you got to remember Sasheen Littlefeather. She was a Native American who went up there to accept the award for Marlon Brando and to take her moment to speak out for the rights of Native Americans. I've never forgotten Sasheen Littlefeather. There are all those moments. This is that kind of moment, a cultural moment. And I, for one, I'm looking forward to see what Chris Rock has to say tonight when he has the first of 3 sold-out shows in Boston. They're stand-up shows, so they're pretty much his life, his act. You'll probably see, I'll probably talk about it tomorrow, Chris Rock. And we'll see if the Academy, I don't think the Academy is going to rule whether or not they take away or not take away, or what kind of disciplinary action goes against Will Smith, but something's going to happen. Could take weeks, they said, but we'll keep a watch out there. But once again, check out my column on the ALDEF blog, aaldef.org/blog. I mean, it's, there it is there, right? On the ALDEF blog, Asian Americans know Will Smith's casual violence can be deadly. This is just my take. My take is that we know violence. We know enough about race too, Asian Americans. But these last 2 years especially, we know all about violence. And we know how it can escalate from virus to spitting to epithets to physical violence to murder. We know how it escalates. And that's why when I say, when Will Smith's open hand struck Chris Rock, you know, Rock felt it. I did too. We all did. It wasn't fake. It was real. Because these last 2 years, Asian Americans know violence in America. This is just about violence. This isn't about inviting comparisons between black and Asian or anything like that. This is just, we can't allow any violence. And I was not surprised when Wanda Sykes essentially said the same thing, when the Academy said the same thing, when Whoopi Goldberg said the same thing, when members of the NAACP